Hey, what's up, everybody? Hutch here, and we're on Module 3-4. This is your lesson on dividing integers. So remember yesterday we talked about the concept of multiplying integers, and we also gave you this trick to remember what the results would be based on what signs you're multiplying. And so we're going to continue that today. Remember that division is just the inverse of multiplication. So you can look at that as a missing multiplication problem. We know that if I looked at this a different way, the question would be what times negative 10 equals 90? And so obviously my answer is going to have to be negative, okay? So that the negative times the negative equals a positive. Okay, so I just wanted you to see that so that you can understand why the trick still works. We can look at division the same way. So this is a positive is love. Okay, a negative is hate. So if you love hating, you actually hate, and that makes sense because if we multiplied, it would be my answer, which is negative times the negative 10 is going to equal the positive. So 90 divided by 10, you just do the division as you normally would, but you know the answer is going to be negative, and so we get a negative 9, okay? And then circle it, and you're done. So same process really is multiplication, you're just doing the division, okay? And so we have love to hate, so 72 divided by negative 9. If you love hating, you actually hate, and you would just have to either type 72 divided by 9 to see what it is, or if you already know that 9 times 8 is 72, then you put your 8 and circle your answer of negative 8. Double check and make sure that makes sense. Okay, so you have a negative 8 times a negative 9 would equal 72. A negative 9 times a negative 10 would equal 90. Okay, and so that makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and divide integers with different signs. You can see we have the word problem here. The best underwater divers can dive almost 380 feet in 4 minutes, okay, using only a rope as they descend. At this rate, what integer represents the change in feet of a diver's position after 1 minute? Okay. So since we're asking what it is for 1 minute and we're given this like ratio right here, we know that that just means I can find the unit rate. Okay, so let's go ahead and set it up. So 380 feet per 4 minutes. And you can see our fraction here, our ratio, is the same thing as division. Okay, and we want to know, well, what is it for 1 minute? Okay, so let's go ahead and how do we find unit rates? Remember from before, we just divide the numerator divided by the denominator. Okay, and so they're diving 380 feet in 4 minutes. What is it per minute? So let's go ahead and do the division. 380 divided by 4. Okay, and so we're descending 95 feet in 1 minute. Okay, and so if you think about this, a descent would be we're going negative 380 feet in 4 minutes. So a negative divided by a positive. I hate to love. And so if you hate to love, you actually hate. And so my answer is negative as well. Okay. And so we have negative 95 or a descent of negative 95 feet per minute is our answer. Okay, so just being aware of that word descend can be represented as that. Okay, or let's go ahead and check do your check for that. A neighbor is improving his dog's fitness level by working on agility training. Before beginning the training regiment, the dog weighed 65 pounds. After 9 weeks of training, the dog weighed 45 pounds. Okay, so here's my starting weight, here's my ending weight. Okay, what integer represents the change in weight the dog averaged in pounds per week over the 9 weeks? So I need to pay attention to what this is. What length is this? It says after 9 weeks. So this is happening in 9 weeks. And the question is, what integer represents the change in weight per week instead? So it's one of those, I'm changing it from 9 weeks to a unit rate of per week. So let's go ahead and set this up. I know to find the change, I need to go ahead and do the end minus start to find out how much change happened. Okay, so I was 47, so end minus start. And so we have 47 minus 65, and that's over 9 weeks. Okay, and this is pounds. So let's go ahead and just solve that for first. Okay, so we have 47 minus 65. Okay, or think of it as KFC adding the opposite. So different sign, subtract 65 minus 47, but the answer is going to be negative. Okay, and so we have a negative 18 pounds in 9 weeks. So that's the change that occurred, is we lost 18 pounds. So just make sure that makes sense. Now I want to know per week, so that's where I'm going to do my division and calculate the unit rate. So the question is, how many pounds did I lose per week? Okay, so we're going to do negative 18 divided by 9. Think about your love-hate. So I hate to love. If I hate loving, my answer is going to be a hate as well. Let's go ahead and do our 18 divided by 9, which you already know is 2. And so we have negative 2 pounds per week. Okay, so that's all you're doing for those kind of problems. All right, let's go ahead to dividing integers with the same sign. So we have I hate to hate. If you hate to hate, you actually love. Okay, and so my answer is going to be positive. I'm just making a little note there. So negative 30 divided by negative 6, we can just think of it as 30 divided by 6, and the answer is 5, because we're wondering what times 6 equals 30. I'm just going to circle my 5. Okay, let's go ahead and check. Okay, so we have negative 84 divided by negative 12. A negative divided by a negative is actually a positive. Hate to hate, so you actually love. And then you just have to know what times 12 is 84. If you don't know, you could obviously go to your calculator. If you know, then you're just writing 7. Okay, and let's just make sure this makes sense. Okay, a positive 7 times a negative 12 equals a negative 84. Okay, and so that works. It's a good mental check as you go. All right, let's go ahead and do some substitutions and evaluate these expressions. I'm going to do a rewrite here, not with the invisible ink. So we have y divided by x. Let's go ahead and substitute that out. The y is negative 155, and the x is negative 5. So this is the same thing as writing it out like this. Okay, but we're going to use fraction bars or the vernaculum way more often. So let's get used to that. So negative 155 divided by negative 5, we have I hate to hate, so I actually love, okay, which is going to be positive. And so we can just do our 155 divided by 5, and we have a positive 31 that we're going to circle. Okay, all right, let's substitute the next ones. We have y over x. Y is negative 162. X is negative 6. If I hate to hate, I actually love. Let's go ahead and do the 162 divided by 6. And we have a positive 27. So 27 times a negative 6 equals negative 162. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and do an apply here. So this I'm going to push you. This is an advanced class. You're in pre-algebra or 7th grade accelerated. There's lots of ways to solve multi-step problems. I really would like you to push yourself to write some more complex expressions rather than a whole bunch of separate little work. If you're able to do this, that's going to be showing that you can think at a higher level. And so I'd like to push you towards that as we go. We'll walk through a couple different options though as we go. So Natalie had $165 in the bank at the beginning of the summer. So sometimes as I read, I just start making some notes. Okay, so this is what she had at the beginning. Over the next 10 weeks, she worked at a summer camp and added $160 to her savings each week. Okay, so she already had 165. So if I'm writing an expression out here, I'm adding on some other stuff that happened, and that could be positive or negative, right? So she worked and she added 160 each week. Okay, so I'm adding 160 to that, but it's each week. So how many weeks was that? It was 10. Each means multiplication, so that's why I'm doing times 10. Okay, and then it says though, while spending only 40 per week. Okay, so I can, now that I have that information, I can actually change that. So she earned 160 and spent 40. So wouldn't that be minus 40? Okay, so I have this whole thing right here. So that's what's happening so far is in a week she adds 160 and subtracts 40. And that happens though for how many weeks? 10 weeks. So I can multiply all that by 10. Okay. Now, once she gets back to school, she plans to spend $105 per week. So whatever her total earnings are after all that stuff, she's just going to blow $105 per week. And the question is, well, how many 105s can she spend until she runs out of money? So that's where we have to see that we're going to be dividing all this by the 105 to see how many 105s she can actually spend, and each 105 is a week. So now I can go ahead and do this, but I need to think about order of operations. And remember, that's G, ER, MD, AS. That's our germ DOS, right? Grouping, exponents and roots, multiplication, division, then addition, subtraction. So let's go ahead and solve some of these as we go. So first is our grouping or our parentheses. So we have 160 minus 40, okay, is 120, okay? And so I'm just going to make a little note here. We're going to work above, okay? 120. Now, I have addition on the left, and I have multiplication on the right. Order of operations says I'm still going to take care of multiplication, division. So I did the grouping, and now I'm on multiplication and division. Okay, so 120 times 10. So I'm going to join this together. We know that's going to just move the decimal place to the right. So we have 1,200. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a rewrite here. So we have 165 plus 1,200 over 105. So this is where we are so far. Okay, let's go ahead and add our numerator together. I talked to you about numerators also count as grouping. So it's this sort of invisible parentheses that you have to take care of before doing the division. So we have 1,200 plus 165 is obviously 1,365. Okay, so we have 1,365. Okay, so this is her total earnings for the entire, 10 weeks. And we're wondering, well, if she now spends $105 per week, how many weeks can she last? So let's go ahead and do the division. 1,365 divided by 105. Okay, and it looks like 13 weeks. Okay, so she can make withdrawals for 13 weeks. Okay, so I know that may be a little bit overwhelming for you, okay, but the more we do it, you're going to start to see how you can create those kinds of single path expressions. All right, let's go ahead and try the check. It says you start a pool cleaning business in the neighborhood. You start your business with $1,000 of savings. The table shows the expenses and revenue after 1 week. So remember, like we've done before, let's make a note that this table is representing 1 week. And at this rate, how many weeks will your savings last? Okay. And so again, we have this situation where we're starting with $1,000, and then we have this 1 week of expenses and revenue. Okay, so we need to sort of take all this and turn it into a single number. Okay, and so let's go ahead and figure out what that all would be. So we could come up with this sort of complex expression, and I would challenge you to see if you can figure out what that is. The other option would be to break it down a little bit, right? And just add up all of your expenses. Now remember, expenses are negatives and revenues are positives. So we have all these negative numbers and we have one thing of income. Okay. And so what we're doing is we're taking our $1,000 original amount and we're dividing it up by how much we actually end up making in 1 week, okay, to see how many weeks our savings will last. Okay, so that's one option, is to go ahead and put everything under there. So a -31 plus the -17 plus the -10 plus a revenue of 30 plus a -12. Okay, and we could take care of all of that and solve everything. Or, option 2 would be start to just figure these out, okay, and do some pieces at a time, which can still be done in that bottom problem anyway. Okay, so same signs, add and keep. So these will all turn into negatives. Plus 17, plus 10, plus 12. Okay, so this is -70 total. So we have a -70 and a +30. But again, you could have done the same thing down below here as well. So we would have had $1,000. You can go through and combine all these. Okay, you could go through and combine all the negatives if you want, and then add the positive. Either way, you'd be at -70 plus 30, and so that's 70 minus 30, and so we're at a -40. Okay, so that means every single week we're actually losing $40, so that's not very good. And so the question is, how many weeks will my savings last? So if I take the $1,000 divided by the -40, think about our love-hate. I love to hate, so I actually hate at the end. Okay, so let's see how many weeks. 1,000 divided by 40. Okay, so it'll last about 25 weeks. Okay, so my savings will last 25 weeks. Okay, because every single time we're losing $40. Okay, all right, so there we go. Let's go ahead and head to your practice and really go through this at a little faster pace now. Okay, all right, so we love to hate, which means we actually hate. What times 2 equals 22? 11. There we go. Okay, all right, I hate to hate. That means I actually love, which is positive. What times 8 is 64? We have 8 times 8 is 64. Okay, so +8. Double checking, 8 times a -8 is a -64. Okay, let's go ahead and look at 5. Okay, we have a hate to hate, which means we actually love. Again, if you don't know what the multiplication would be, just go ahead and type it out. 39 divided by 13, and you have 3. So +3. So 3 times -13 is -39. All right, 2, 3, and 6 are on your own. Let's go ahead and do some evaluating expressions. So here's m over n. It's pretty nice and clear. I think I can just write it right underneath. -32 over 2. And just be careful because there's some different variables listed here that you are or aren't using. Okay, so I have a hate to love If I hate loving, then I actually hate. 32 divided by 2 is 16, but it's negative. I hate to love, so I actually hate. And so we have negative 16. So 2 times 16 is 32, and so that checks out. Okay, you can do 8 and 9 on your own. Let's go ahead and look at number 10. Number 10, we're looking at F and G only. So negative 15 divided by 5. And so I hate to love. So if I hate loving, I actually hate. And what times 5 is 15? 3. So negative 3. Making sure that makes sense. Negative 3 times a positive 5 is negative 15. Okay. All right, 11 and 12 are on your own. Let's take a look at number 13. A submarine descends to a depth of 660 feet below the surface. So that's a negative. Make that note in there. Okay. And it does it in 11 minutes. At this rate, what integer represents the change in feet after 1 minute? So we're finding that unit rate. Okay. And so as you go here, so let's set this up. So negative 660 feet in 11 minutes. So what would it be in 1 minute? Okay. How do we find unit rates? We take the numerator divided by the denominator, and it goes on top, and it is out of 1. Okay. So we do our 660 divided by 11, and I hate to love, which means I actually hate, and we're at negative 60 feet per minute as my answer. Okay. All right, let's go down to your applies. Before we get into applies, I want you to take a look at 18 and do this when you're on your own, and think about why. It says, is the following statement true or false? If n is negative, okay, can n divided by n equal a negative 1? Okay, I want you to think about your rules with dividing integers and tell me what your thoughts are. And so is that true? Is that possible or false? And just justify your response, meaning just explain it in some way. Okay, so don't forget to do number 18. All right, let's go ahead and do your apply. And again, I'm pushing you to see if you can come up with a complex expression rather than doing a whole bunch of separate work. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Over the summer, Paulo opens a dog washing business and begins with $32. So I'm going to start taking a little bit of notes here. So it begins with $32. The table shows how much he earns and spends each week. Oh, let's make a note about the table. This is 1 week worth, okay, of revenue expenses. He works for 8 weeks washing dogs. Okay, so all of this is 1 week. He does it for 8 then. So obviously we're multiplying by 8. When he starts back to school, he wants to spend $60 each week. So how many weeks pass before he needs to wash more dogs? Okay, so let's go ahead and break this down. Think about what revenue and expense means. Expense means losing money. Revenue is adding money. Okay, and so we have, he starts with $32, okay, and then he adds $124. But something else also happens in a week, right? We lose $8, okay, and that's all what happens in a week. Now, the question, though, is how many weeks does he work for? Well, he works for 8 weeks, so I'm going to multiply that information by 8, okay? And then the question is, if this is everything in his bank account, okay, his plan is to spend $60 each week, okay? So we're going to divide the whole thing by 60 to see how many weeks he actually can be spending $60, okay, before he's out of money and has to wash more dogs. So there's our expression. If you were able to, if you can make something like that, that's really showing some higher level skills that they're looking for in Algebra 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and follow our order of operations. Remember, order of operations is germ-DOS. Okay, so we have grouping, which is our parentheses here. So that's our first thing. So we have to do 124 minus 8. Okay, you can do that mentally, but you also don't want to make any silly mistakes. Okay, so this is 116. I'm going to make the note above it. Okay, and then I can go ahead and here's where I'm at right now. I have to do the multiplication. Okay, let's go ahead and move this down a little bit. I shrink it up and move it down. So now I have this multiplication of 116 times 8. Okay, and this is 928. Okay, and then we have this 32 plus 928. Okay, so because we have to take care of the numerator first, I'm just sort of working up, actually. Okay, so you can see we're almost doing this upwards pyramid. Okay, and we end up with plus 32 in the numerator, $960. Okay, and so that's what he earned and has in his bank account after 8 weeks. Okay, and so let's go ahead and reorganize this a little bit. So we have 960, and we're going to divide that up to $60, okay, to see how long that money can last him. So let's go ahead and see. All right, so it'll last him 16 weeks. So how many weeks passed? 16 weeks pass before he needs to wash more dogs. Okay, go ahead and circle your answer, and there you go. Okay, so your last one that you need to look at then is number 16. So I'm just going to read it for you, and then we'll leave it there. So Nick had $100 in his savings account, very similar to Paulo, starting with $32. Over the next 6 months, he worked at a store. So let's figure out what happened over the next 6 months. Each month, he earned $400 and spent $25. Very similar to Paulo earning $116 or earning the $124 and losing $8. Okay, and then that was each month. But remember, this is then extended to 6 months. Okay, so he put all that into his savings account, and now the job's over, and he wants to spend $200 per month. So very similar to Paulo, who wanted to spend $60 each week. How many months can he make withdrawals until he ends up at 0? Okay, so it's a really great imitation problem for you to get a little bit of practice. So give that a shot and let me know if you need any help, and we'll check that tomorrow.